To you, welcome into the Striker Texas MLS podcast. I'm John Arnold. In Austin, it's Chris Bills. In Houston, it's Victor Ariza. We're going to get into everything that happened over the weekend for Texas MLS teams. We're going to think all the way back to Friday night. Yes, it's already been 2 days when Austin FC demolished LAFC Friday night, the first of a national TV doubleheader. Talk about the implications of that, get into the atmosphere with Chris Bills. We'll talk about the Houston Dynamo falling to last place in the West. We'll talk about FC Dallas basically staying the same. Highs, lows, and mids this week. Let's start with the highs with Chris in Austin. Chris, this was a game that Austin fans were dreaming of. I think it's been circled on the calendar for a long time by fans, by players and coaches. They won't maybe tell you that, but it's a pretty critical game. Josh Wolf talked his stuff after the game. It was a big one with big implications. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's just start with the performance. I thought that, from front to back, it was the most complete performance Austin has been or has had. It's what, certainly I think that a lot of the fans have been asking for, which is, just a little bit more organized, a little bit tighter in the back. And that set them up to go forward and to really, just dominate LAFC from start to finish in this one. Diego Fagundes, with the the stunning free kick goal and then a couple assists in the second half. He played his tail off. But you look around the field, it's hard to pick any bad performances. And against a team, that started Gareth Bale for the first time, a front line of Gareth Bale, Chicho Arango, and Carlos Vela, and they were almost non-existent. It was it was impressive to say the least, and I think it was a statement game for Austin FC on national TV, and you could tell that they wanted it just a little bit more than LAFC did.
I think that we've talked so much about what Sebastian Driussi can do, and he was still good in this game, and he still got his, right? Like, he still did Sebastian Driussi things. You can see very much why he's the MVP frontrunner, and I think games like this definitely help. Even though for me, a game like the game against Kansas City, where it's like, Austin probably should have dropped points there, they don't against a pretty bad team because of what Driussi does. When he shows out on national TV, you get all the national writers from other markets who are watching, unless they have something better to do with their Friday night. I certainly was in front of the TV. They're all saying, man, this guy's for real. Everything that Chris Bills is saying, that Victor Rice is saying, that John Arnold's saying about Sebastian Driussi is true. That being said, I think the contributions from Fagundes and Maxi Urruti show that when those guys are on, when he gets help, when someone else is doing something, that's when Austin can really kick into another gear.
Exactly, and I think that's why coming in, I said that, I still don't know that they'll catch LAFC or Philadelphia at this point, for that matter, in the Supporter Shield race. We'll find out, and maybe I'm wrong on that, but I think that this game was more about just proving to anybody who is still doubting that Austin FC is a legitimate MLS Cup contender, and I think it's impossible to watch what they did to LAFC on Friday night and come away with something other than that. Because, like you said, when everybody hits, when Josh Wolf's system is executed, despite maybe some of the gaps in talent in the rosters and things like that, this team is more than capable of beating any team on any given night, and not just that, but playing them off the pitch the way they did to LAFC on Friday night.
I want to get into Wolf's system and his plan for the game in a second, Victor, but let's key in a little bit on what Chris is saying. He's kind of softly saying, not a Supporter Shield race. Victor, you think the race is back on?
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
LFC's I think LFC's a little farther ahead. But I do think we were wondering if Austin's going to be able to do it in the playoffs, right? And this was kind of the closest thing they've had so far to a playoff atmosphere. Big crowd, biggest game in town. I think we do have to take into consideration that it meant maybe a little bit more for Austin than it meant for LAFC. Especially even the last win they had up there. But I think it is a good move direction forward. I think one of my biggest concerns was how is their defense going to hold up against the Premier.
For sure.
I think that was your concern too. And
yes.
Again, we have to wait till the playoffs. But I think there's some good signs there. I think. You see a couple of players maybe need a little more motivation to get into high gear. I think that scuffle with Urruti kind of got him into scoring that double, but good moments, yeah.
I think, like, For me, there's no supporter shield race. I'm not sure how that snuck into the document of the potential question because we're 3-3 or 3-3. None of us think this is going to change. I think if anything, if LAFC does start to slip, I think Philly jumps up and takes it because the East is not very good. That's my secret hot take. Sorry, Sam Jones in Atlanta and all of our friends watching from the East Coast, but I think it's not a supporter shield race for me, and I think it's also worth pointing out, like you're saying, Victor, like this game did mean more to Austin FC. It's a home game. They're trying to bounce back, to have this proof, this big statement of, hey, that we can do this. We are this team that's going to be able to compete for trophies. And LAFC, they're like, all right, well, time to stick our new guy in for the first ever time. Now, of course, this is a guy who has won the UEFA Champions League, basically willed his nation to the World Cup. Like in Gareth Bale, it's an unbelievable player, and he has had time a little bit to adapt with LAFC before, but also this is a new variation. This isn't kind of like throwback LAFC. And a weird thing about LAFC is that even though they're averaging, the only team in the league that's averaging still more than 2 points a game, they are a team that's still modifying. We're seeing players coming in and going out.
Yeah.
We're seeing them try and kind of reach, I guess, this final form where you'd say, man, the form in June and July was pretty darn impressive. Hopefully for them, from their perspective, they don't screw things up and have a collapse. Chris, when you saw LAFC, we talked about how maybe this means a little bit more for Austin, but that scuffle was real. There were some fireworks happening early for sure. I'm not saying this game meant nothing to LAFC, but you do have to kind of keep the state of the opponent in mind when you're talking about this. What was the vibe that you got from the opponent and also from Austin as to why this game was as critical as it was?
Yeah, I think that you got that feeling right from the, even when the lineups came out. I think, Nick Lima touched on it, and you'll be able to read that in a notebook that I'll have up, of just like the attention that's drawn when you look on the team sheet, you're Nick Lima, and you see that you're lining up against Gareth Bale. That raises the stakes a little bit. And I think that Austin FC felt that from moment one, and even, knowing, I'm sure these guys were aware of the ticket prices, and, the spectacle, the fact that this game was on in 83 countries. And to LAFC, I think it was sort of just another game, but that doesn't mean that they didn't, they weren't trying to win the match, right? Like, I think that like Austin FC came out and they took care of business. And, from, the moment that Diego Fagundes scored that first goal, I think, it caught LAFC's attention. And then, I think that the scuffle, if you want to talk about that sort of was sparked, I think, by Sebastian Drusi sending a Rabona like 40 yards down the sideline.
That's exactly what started it.
Even though that it didn't hit its mark, Jesus Maria gives Maxi Ruti a little shove into the barrier there. Maxi doesn't like it very much. He goes and
trash move, by the way.
By Maxi or by the shove?
No,
I thought
the shove.
Yeah.
And look, I thought that Maxi had every right to go over there. And he didn't do much. Yeah.
No, and then Crepeau comes in and it's like, sometimes the goalkeeper will play sort of like peacemaker, and he plays instigator. But it had the exact adverse effect. All I'll say is if I could Rabona even like 20 yards, I would do it every single time. I would absolutely.
Exactly.
I can't blame him for that. Let's talk a little bit about Josh Wolf's plan, how he set up this game, and why it worked so well. Chris, what was maybe different about this game plan than what we've seen in past weeks? The trip to Minnesota, some of the other away games obviously are a little different category, but what did Wolf try and do, and what worked?
Yeah, well, I think it had everything to do with the fullbacks, and Nick Lima and John Gallagher, I thought, played their best match in matches of the season, respectively. And you talk a lot about like they were in the right spots. They weren't flying forward. They weren't out of position. Every time that they needed to deal with something, Austin FC was in position to do it. But they also did take those moments to in the wide areas, stretch Gareth Bale and Carlos Vela and sort of test them. Are you going to run today? And the answer, majority of the time, was no. And I think they wore those guys down, and that I think set up the rest of the game to sort of be, I want to say it was 11 versus 9, but at moments it sort of felt that way, because when Austin was attacking, there wasn't a lot of help coming from the attacking trio from LAFC, and that's where Austin FC thrives because they know exactly where they're going to be, and if there's space to exploit, they're going to exploit it. And they were just on top of things. They, Josh Wolf said it on the ESPN broadcast, and I thought that it was, a confident statement from him, which is we know we can hurt LAFC, and they did. They executed all those things, and it was really impressive. And I thought Josh Wolf had every right to be feeling himself because he took it to his old U.S. men's national team teammate Steve Cherundolo. Absolutely dominated the tactical matchup, I thought.
LAFC still 6 points ahead in the Western Conference, and in the Supporters' Shield race, Philly is wedged in between those two teams. But a remarkable turnaround, great work from Josh Wolf. Before we move on to the other two games, Chris, I do want to talk about the clip that you posted. It's going around a little bit where Wolf seems to kind of call out you and the media for kind of I felt it was sort of, you tell me in the room what it felt like. I felt it was sort of hey, no one believed in us last year. It's yeah, because they weren't getting results last year. I mean, the performances weren't terrible.
And because they were an expansion team.
Yeah, I mean, you were writing the performances weren't terrible. It just seemed like he really was feeling himself after the game. But I thought it was, if you're feeling yourself, talk, feel good, do a little preening. But I don't know. I thought it was a little weird to be looking back to those moments. But maybe that's a significant motivator for Austin, for Wolf himself this year. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he liked the question very much, and I won't get into who asked it or anything like that. But it was it was sort of a question directed toward last year, and I think when he's kind of got these buzzwords when he hears something, he just kind of his mind triggers and he goes into that space. I think though, he still feels a little bit slighted by people that wanted him out last year, and he's sort of saying, hey, look at what we're doing now. All of that was part of what you're seeing now, and he's absolutely right. I was a little bit, I shouldn't say I was surprised by the reaction, nationally, because it wasn't just you, John. There was some other people sort of getting in my DMs and being like, what the heck's up with this guy? And I think that if you deal with him every day, it's kind of Josh Wolf's personality. He reads everything, he takes everything in, and he wants to prove you wrong. And it's not, and I'm finding this with, Felipe Martins and some of the other guys on the team. It's not just about changing minds. It's about seeing people that are doubting you, proving them wrong, and then continuing to take it personally. And maybe that's just the mindset. I don't know. Maybe that's just the mindset that this team has overall. But I don't think I didn't take it personally.
Listen,
I appreciate that some other people did.
We all said they're not in the Supporters' Shield race. If they want to take that personally, we'll certainly talk about it on the show.
And they have to prove it in the playoffs. We've also said they
have
to prove it in the playoffs.
And XG is not
seeing
up
on the board, Josh Wolf.
XG is not seeing what Austin FC is putting down either. That was the other thing.
Driussi is a cheapo for XG, man. I mean, he outperforms. I mean, when you look at what, again, and that's why I'm saying, just kind of closing the discussion with where we started it. If Maxi Urruti can score goals in the playoffs, if Fagundes can pull those tricks out of his bag in the playoffs, this team can absolutely win MLS Cup. They did it on Friday. They've done it a few other times in the season, but we haven't seen someone else consistently come up alongside Driussi who outperforms his XG in in a wild way, right?
He's on pace. He's on pace to break. I think it's Lee Wynn's record from 2014.
Really?
Oh, there you go.
To Dallas native Lee Wynn.
To be the the goals minus XG king in MLS. He's at 8.2 right now, overperforming his XG on the season.
Night. That's
so
Texas,
it's crazy.
What can we say?
Sometimes they should name the award after Lee Wynn.
I mean, hashtag winning, I guess. He's back in Vietnam. Lee Wynn is playing back in Vietnam. He was here coaching a little bit in North Texas. He went to the Washington WSL team, and now he's back in Vietnam, a Richardson native. Let's get to the team in North Texas. FC Dallas takes the lead at home, but stop me if you heard this one before. Gives it away. Alan Velasco with a goal in the 7th minute. Nice team goal, good build, but they couldn't find that second goal that so often has been the difference or would make the difference. Anderson Julio in the 69th minute scores for Real Salt Lake. I don't know how many people love midweek MLS, but FC Dallas is extremely excited because they've been 2 games ahead in the games played for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's just hard to tell exactly where you are, and everyone's fighting for playoff position and everything. Real Salt Lake, Minnesota this week, both direct rivals. That's a game where, like, I don't even know what the math says FC Dallas should root for. I guess a draw, because then they both don't get full points. But when you're talking about the playoff race, like, finally there will be some parity. And then FC Dallas has a massive one because they go to Minnesota, the direct rival for that third spot. A game like Saturday's, it's kind of the same story. And I was hearing, Victor, like a little hint of Nico Estevez after the game, sort of saying, like, this is what we are. He said we wanted to get the second goal. We didn't have the quality we needed to find the last pass, to get the last shot, to make the right, correct last decision, we can say. And he said, look, it's still my staff's first year. We're still working with these guys, getting to know some of these guys. And to me, it was sort of a, not like, oh, well, like, we're not going to win MLS Cup, because I think he would still say they can chase the silverware. But I do think there's a little element of, this is what we are. This is what we do. We need to get better at this. He's not saying it's okay, but we've seen this kind of repeat.
I guess the question is, what do they got to do to elevate, right? I mean, they're trying.
Yeah.
They try and bring in Leggett, right? And I guess that still kind of keeps them in the same place. I still think it's maybe unlocking a little bit more of that front three. I mean, at the beginning of the year, they were kind of off and running.
It feels like you look at the minutes of the goals and, the fact that, they're still hanging on to 1-0. You get to the 69th minute, you give one up. It feels like you're missing an impact sub, right? And we talk about a lot about Franco Jara and the things that he brings onto the pitch. I know he's been better this year, but
he was hurt for this game. I think, like, if he had been healthy in this game, you do see him on the field, and maybe he does bring something, but he was really poor, like we talked about last week against Nashville. I definitely think, like, an attacking sub would help, but they did close out the game in, like, really impressive fashion. Brandon Cervena missed a chance in the 89th minute. That should have been the winner. I think, like, that is what you're missing is, maybe an impact sub, but someone who can get those details right, who can get those small moments right, who can make that last pass, actually finish the opportunities that are created. I think the other sort of thing to circle is that Paul Arriola is doing all the right things. He's getting into the right places. He was the player of the month in May, had I think maybe dipped a little bit in the summer because of the number of games. The heat is difficult, I think, for a first-time North Texas player who, grew up in Southern California, played in Mexico, played in DC, and now all of a sudden is tossed into a very hot summer. He could really use a goal. I think when he gets one, the lid comes off. And if he gets one in the next, there's 5 games left for FC Dallas. If he gets one, then I think you start to see him get that May form again. But, Velasco scoring goals, Jesus Ferreira scoring goals, and he's the only member of that attacking front three that's right now not necessarily consistently finding the back of the net. Like I said, I mean, it's not like he's playing poorly. He's getting into the spaces, but sometimes, like in Portland, he had a shot that would have gone in on, 9 out of 10 goalkeepers. It gets saved.
One assist in his last 8 appearances, so that's not. And I mean, this is a guy that it's supposed to be going to the World Cup, so I don't know if that's very good for the U.S. either.
No, but like I said, I mean, I do think he's the type of player where if he gets one, he will get 5. I mean, I really do think that it's going to be solid. I think the other thing that you see for FC Dallas, and I wrote about this a little going into the Nashville game because Jesus Ferreira was suspended, is that it's Ferreira or bust at 9. Jara is injured in this game, but he didn't do anything against Nashville. If you bring him off the bench, you say, maybe he does something, maybe not. If Ferreira has an amazing World Cup and you get this offer for him that's bigger than the Pepe offer than you had or something, you're going to have 0 9s next year. Well, yeah, I mean, you have some capital. You can go find.
You can go get another.
Maybe they've already got some people. Maybe they've got some targets circled. But as we know, not every European import or South American import or import from wherever simply works. It's not the end of the world for Dallas. I think that you're looking at the result. Okay, you took points off of a direct rival in RSL. You also dropped points. They're still sitting 4th in the points per game, which would get them a home playoff game. I think, despite the fact that they sometimes get into this habit of scoring early and then not closing out games specifically at home, if you get a home playoff game, you feel really, really good about your chances in that first round. So
they're kind of letting some results slip up, so that's becoming less and less probable.
So, I mean, we talked about impact subs and, we talked about, all those guys that could be doing it. Seems like one of those guys that should have been in the mix this year was Shun, and I'm really curious to hear your takeaways on him leaving the club. Felt like a kid with a lot of lot of promise when we saw him, come into the mix last year, and just didn't happen for him in year two. What is the story there?
I don't really know. Nico Estevez didn't want to play him. He didn't get a single MLS minute this year, and it wasn't like he was on the bench for I think 9 games. So it wasn't like he was totally erased, but you never felt like he was going to come into a game.
That sounds like he was. That sounds like he was erased.
Yeah, but it wasn't like he'd like make the squad and then wouldn't be coming in. So I mean, he played 2 Open Cup games, goes back to his native Hungary, which I think is great for him. Was a really nice guy, like kept a positive attitude till the very end, but clearly wasn't in Nico Estevez's plans. And on the one hand, he definitely showed promise last year as a young player, but on the other, last week in that Nashville game, it's 3-0. And Nico sticks on Benny Redzik, and it's like, oh, well, here's a guy who's from the FC Dallas Academy who fits in more with this kind of ethos of the club. So I wonder if that's a factor there, is that he kind of would prefer, I think there will be more players from that homegrown pipeline, maybe even contributing toward the end of the season. Keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on the striker. Shun goes back to Hungary. Good move for him. Good move for the club, because they get an international spot open. I don't know that they'll use it before the roster freeze, but I do think you might hear something coming soon. Again, stay tuned to the striker. It's as I mentioned, Dallas finally picks up that game in hand, or one of the games that they have in hand, or gives it back. I guess I don't know how this works. They have almost the same number of games as teams do now.
Considering they only
teams have games in hand, so then they give one back, but then Dallas gets the game back. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, considering they have like one less game or so, you think they're in the trouble of getting out of the playoff race, like on the last day or something like that?
No, I think when you look at if they can take care of business, when you look at the 5 games that are remaining, the Minnesota trip is extremely difficult, and LAFC visits North Texas. Other than that, the other 3 are against non-playoff teams right now. Obviously, that could change, but right now you're looking at, they go to Colorado, not an easy trip. It's altitude. They've been bad against Colorado, but the Rapids are not looking amazing. They go to San Jose. They're looking even worse. And what's the other game I haven't mentioned? They go to Minnesota this weekend, LAFC, at San Jose, at Colorado. Oh, and they close against Sporting Kansas City at home. Look, if you're gonna pick a game where you need a result,
I mean, if they draw against Sporting Kansas City at home on the last day, that might not be. I guess we'll see.
I understand what you're saying. They certainly don't have the X by their name. I think they should feel good about the playoffs. I think it would be a disappointment for FCD at this point if they've been rolling in third for so long and they aren't able to lock up the home playoff game.
And I do always think of, at this time of year in MLS, I always think of the points that you have being almost worth more than the games that you have left, just because the unpredictable nature of MLS. When you're talking, unless you're talking about the Supporters Shield, where those teams are picking up points, at more of a rapid pace. But I also think that the advantage, as I'm listening to this conversation where FC Dallas is at in the season, the other advantage they might have is they're going to get more time on the training pitch than everybody else in the playoff race over the next few weeks.
And they're pretty healthy. I mean, they're pretty healthy. So it's like
so it's less risk of injury. You get more time to work on those things that you're not quite as sharp at, and you hopefully go into the playoffs, with a better understanding and in a good form. But those things can change quickly if they hit a poor form. But I mean, I still believe a lot. I still believe a lot in FC Dallas, and I believe in Nico Estevez to figure it out. So that more hours with him in the film room and on the training pitch, that seems like a good thing for FC Dallas.
You would think, but apparently Houston lost Teenage Hadebe and Hector Herrera to the training pitch over the last couple of weeks. So that's not necessarily a guarantee either.
Let's get there real quick. Just to note, as I wrote on the striker, you can check out the piece about kind of dropping points from winning positions. 8 points left on the table, lost from winning positions, settling for draws this season for FCD, including the 1-1 draw on Saturday. All right, let's do it. Let's talk Dynamo. Teenage Hadebe, no Hector Herrera. The trading pitch strikes. It's the first time that Herrera's. What's that?
Yeah, didn't travel to Minnesota. Herrera, he stayed at home. We reported on the strike early in the week that he was training separately to start the week, but it looked like he had already come back to first team training, and then it's like, it's not there. An interesting tidbit, right? Houston Dynamo 2 traveled with the Houston Dynamo to Minnesota. They played the same day. They got they got a 1-0 lead over Minnesota United too. They held on, they won, but Houston, the first team, couldn't do it. It's kind of sad, right? When you even if you're kind of looking at it as a neutral, you see the situation. This was a game on a 5-game winless streak, and Minnesota wasn't at its best. So Houston essentially, because of that, dominated most of the game. Had 3 points in hand. You're thinking, all right, here's an unexpected result. They're going to bring 3 points home, and then give up a free kick. Reynoso, doesn't necessarily hit it the best way, but Pico tries to defend it, goes off his foot, and it's an own goal. And then it just kind of starts to unravel from there, where the second goal falls just a couple of minutes later from Amarilla, and there you go. That's that. Just kind of like it was a couple weeks in Vancouver. They found a way to lose the game, and now it's 6 winless, and this is the way that Dynamo is going, right? Again. Well, I talked about Dallas. Could they slip down, right? I mean, Houston was right there on the cusp of that playoff race before Ache got here. We're talking about how it was going to be an impact signing, and then now they've dropped all the way down to last in the Western Conference. Sporting Kansas City got a better transfer over the summer. I think that kind of not that I don't think they're going to make a race, but I do think that you're starting to see how they were going to get better. San Jose starting to find results, and Houston just can't seem to get a win to save its life. So. LAFC is coming to town, and that's going to be maybe a tough night Wednesday at PNC. But the bigger overall picture again is where is the progress going with this team, right? I guess you can say Corey Baird scored in this game. It took him about 23 games, but at least he got something. Maybe Nagamura's trying to see guys like him and seeing what they can contribute. Before they make roster adjustments in the offseason. But
I mean, some big off-field news, right, during the week as Ted Siegel kind of continues to consolidate his control of the Dynamo.
Yeah, that was big.
People who have been around for a long time, and Gabriel Brenner, the Golden Boy, sadly no longer involved. I say sadly. I mean, I know that he wasn't amazing for Dynamo, but
no, I think fans are fine. Fans are happy about that because there was all this talk always about Oscar's going to be at the games and he's going to be, rooting people on. And then, it just, didn't happen from there. Even just on social media, right? Even if it's just kind of support from afar, that was never there. The investment by Gabriel Brenner was never truly there, right? Ben Gill as well, for as much as he might have publicly had said, shame on us. But in the end, he had money also, and it just never saw the field. Instead, he's doing other investments, right? With Luna over there at Leganés in Spain, Cancun FC in Mexico. So, just guys that came in and parked their money and did nothing for the team saw the decline, and they're just as responsible in the decline of not just the Dynamo for 10 years, but the stop in the growth of soccer in Houston for a long time.
Yeah, let's talk about kind of the long-term projection. You're talking about Nagamura maybe moving some pieces, trying to give guys opportunities to make a case maybe in some ways for 2023. Our friend from TUDN, Michele, says that even if the Dynamo lose out, that his spot, Nagamura's spot, is safe for 2023. I don't know if I heard some rumblings. I think you heard some stuff where, after certain points in the season, maybe that wasn't necessarily true.
Right.
Is that a smart move to keep Nagamura? Look, I think if you're Nagamura, if you're someone who's in his camp, you're pointing northwest at Josh Wolf and saying let me
that's exactly what they're doing. That's exactly what
turn this around.
Yeah,
but it's I mean, I guess there's parallels. Is it similar enough? Ache and Driussi clearly don't play the same position, but could you say we had a summer impact signing? I don't think it's the same either. They're not getting better in the same way that Austin FC was at the end of last year. But would you keep him?
It's tough, man. I said from the beginning, if you want my personal opinion, I said from the beginning, I didn't think this was the route they should have taken because they did this with Tab Ramos and they did this with Wilmer Cabrera. And unless you were going to learn from those, even though it wasn't under GM Pat Onstad, right? Because it's his first season as well. He's also a rookie GM, and it's the first full season under the new owner, Ted Siegel. But I thought you do. Maybe they were naive to just kind of erase the past and said, all right, this is our project now. We're going to do things our way. But the same mistakes, essentially been made. And I think, I said if you were going to go with this roster, you needed a more experienced coach, and voila, right? I mean, it's tough to deal with egos coming from, a youth system. And I think if this is going to be Nagamura's team, then they have to make the appropriate moves to make it Nagamura's team. And that's one thing you can give the coach this year. They haven't done that. It's been the lack of proactivity to make moves to this roster. That's a big issue, right? And if Pat Onstad hadn't won 2 MLS Cup championships, he would be getting a lot more criticism. Houston has to make moves quicker. They need to be more proactive. I think we all sort of knew, right, that Nagamura is going to be back next year. They're not going to, because this is the way MLS is. They're going to give him another shot. But to kind of say that publicly as well is sort of to be on, fall on deaf ears, right? For a public that has withstood a long time of no playoff results. I mean, you can't let that get out publicly. At least lie and say, all right, we're going to evaluate the situation and see where we go in 2023. But I mean, to kind of let Michele go on air and say, even if every game gets lost for the rest of the season, Nagamura is still in. I mean, it sort of speaks of content, no? I mean,
or at least Siegel saying like, this is the direction that I want things to go. In some ways it's a show of faith.
I hope that Paulo Nagamura is showing more, more of that leadership and is heavily involved in letting ownership know exactly the players that he wants and that there's a plan moving forward into next season. If that's the case, then I can totally see this. And because you can't just pull the plug in MLS. But the thing is that it's like you're saying, Victor. I was a little bit surprised when they went this direction in the first place. That's not Paulo Nagamura's fault. I think it's up to him now to prove that he is the guy.
Yes,
and I think that it's good to have a freedom at the end of a season like this to, go play the players that you believe in, not necessarily going after results, but, trying to build something for the future. So from that standpoint, I can see it. Like I said, I just hope that, he's as heavily involved as he's going to need to be in getting the players in that he needs.
I will add,
that's what it's going to come down to is whether everybody's on the same page. And, if they're just believing in him because they're thinking about Josh Wolf and thinking about the fact of all the other resets that haven't worked, that's a recipe for disaster because you're going to have to hit the reset button eventually if this isn't the right guy.
Yeah, I'll mention it real quick. The last couple of years, said it with Tab Ramos that he needed to be a little bit more. I'm going to use his word because he did a recent interview with The Athletic now that he got a job over in the USL Championship, right? Where he looks back and he should have been a little bit more flexible. And I think at the time we were saying he needed to be a little more flexible because there's egos here in this division, right? Dealing with pros, dealing with contracts, dealing with incentives, and I think that's one thing that because I was one of the guys saying last year that I think a better coach will be getting better results than what Josh Wolf was getting in Austin. But to his credit, and I think I've said it on this podcast and on this medium this year, he's adapted, he's changed, right? He's been more flexible in that sense with his roster, with his moves, and I think that's if Nagamura has that in him, and if he can be less stubborn than most first team coaches are, then he's going to find a way. But if he continues, and I think the road is there to show that guys that don't adapt, guys that aren't willing to change and aren't willing to, do what is necessary to win at this level. I mean, I think you see those coaches, the game passed them by. Even the experienced coaches like Dominic Kinnear, who won championships here in Houston. I think that's the key. So if he has that personality, and again, if the club is willing to back him, because that's just as important as well.
Far
this can be successful in Houston.
I think both Luchi Gonzalez, who is going to be coaching the San Jose Earthquakes next season, and Tab Ramos, who is now working in Hartford, I think they learned from the situation, the sort of parallel situations in a lot of ways that they were thrown into and will become better managers. Will Nagamura's stint at the Dynamo be that kind of learning experience? Will it be a Josh Wolf situation? We'll have to wait and see, and we'll chronicle it on The Striker. We're already over time, but real quick, I want to shout out a couple local businesses because we were all, I think, hanging out locally. Chris, you're down doing a show with Benjamin Virgen in Austin, our LAFC writer at The Striker. You guys were hanging out at Hop Squad, is that right?
Yeah, Hop Squad. Yeah, shout out to Greg and everybody at Hop Squad for welcoming us in. It's always great to be right in the middle, right in the thick of things, right there on match days, and the fact that they give us that space, give us everything that we need to get that done is massive, and I love the work that they're doing over there. It's a great spot to hang out, and Circle as well. You can't go wrong on Austin FC match days checking out one of the local breweries around there. But certainly shout out to Hop Squad for letting us do that.
I was down at Revolver for my birthday. meal. Revolver, best tacos in Dallas. A little pricey. They got a new cantina situation going on. I actually like the original better, but they were awesome. Always delicious tacos. Best pulpo in America? I think so. Victor, you got a local spot you want to shout out?
No, I guess I'll do. There's a panaderia by my house, La Victoria.
Yeah.
It's always a good breakfast spot. So there you go.
Breakfast.
We're back, baby.
Yes.
We're back. All right, and we will be back. Oh, you know what? I don't know if we will be back next week on Monday because it's Labor Day. We'll be laboring over the weekend, but we'll figure it out.
I think I'll be on no, wait, Monday. I'll be back. Never mind.
Were you going to
I'm gonna flight I was gonna be on a flight, but that's Sunday. I'm getting my days all mixed up, but I'm down for Monday. But we'll figure it out between the three.
I'm down for Monday anyway. Well, come back, listener, and we'll have a podcast sometime next week to talk about the games this week. Double match week for Austin and Houston. Single match week for FC Dallas.
Just hit subscribe and you'll get the new episode.
Yeah, just hit subscribe. It's easy. You know how podcasts work. We'll be back. Talk to you then. Take care.